Myra lived on a green world far from the center of the stars. The colony was quiet, filled with small farms and simple homes. People lived close to the land, working with soil and water instead of machines. The sky was wide, with two pale moons that glowed at night. To Myra, it was a safe place, a place to raise a family and rest far from war. Her husband, Ryan, was a human. He came from Earth many years ago, though he rarely spoke about his past. Ryan was a quiet man, calm and steady in every way. He worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset, his hands always moving but his mouth saying little. He never argued, never raised his voice, and never showed anger. To Myra, he was gentle, and for many years she thought that was enough. Myra herself was not human. She belonged to the Lyran people, tall and proud, with eyes that gleamed like stone and skin marked with faint silver lines. The Lyran valued strength above all things. Children learned how to fight before they learned how to write. Honor was measured by skill with a blade, and bravery in battle was praised in every song. When Myra chose to marry Ryan, many in her village shook their heads. They called humans weak, soft, and afraid of battle. Some whispered that Myra had chosen a farmer because she was tired of the warrior's life. Others said she had made a mistake, for what could a quiet human offer the daughter of a proud Lyran clan? Myra ignored their voices, but their words still rested heavy in her heart. Each morning she watched Ryan work. He bent his back in the soil, carried water from the stream, and mended broken tools. His life was simple, and he seemed content. Myra often asked him why he never joined the Lyran warriors during training. He would only smile in his calm way and answer, "The field needs me more than the sword." Myra wished she could believe him fully. She wished she could silence the doubts that sometimes grew inside her. The Lyran warriors around her carried their blades with pride, showing their scars as marks of honor. Ryan carried nothing but a simple knife for cutting bread and fruit. He never lifted his hands in anger, not even when others mocked him. One evening, Myra sat with him by the fire. The light of the flames made his face look even quieter, like the calm surface of water. She turned to him and asked, "Ryan, do you never feel shame when they laugh at you? Do you not wish to stand among them with pride?" He looked into the fire before answering. "I do not need their pride, Myra. I need only this life, and you." His words warmed her heart, yet they also troubled her. For she was a Lyran, and part of her longed for strength, for the courage of warriors. She wanted to believe that Ryan was enough, but the whisper of doubt never left her completely. The village around them was not without fear. News came from travelers that the Vayruk, a fierce empire of conquerors, had begun raiding the outer colonies. These raiders were known for their cruelty and power. Entire villages had been destroyed, their people carried away as slaves. When the news reached the Lyran settlement, the warriors sharpened their blades and trained with greater fire. They marched through the streets, armor gleaming, ready for the call of battle. Their voices were loud, their pride unshaken. Ryan only continued to work in the fields. One neighbor, a Lyran named Roloz, often mocked him openly. "Your human husband is no warrior, Myra," he said. "When the Vayruk come, he will hide in the dirt. You should have chosen a real mate, not a farmer." Myra felt anger burn in her chest, but before she could answer, Ryan simply bowed his head and walked away without a word. His silence made Roloz laugh louder. Myra wanted to shout, to demand that her husband stand tall, yet Ryan's calm eyes held no shame. That night, Myra lay awake beside him. She thought of her people, proud and unyielding, and she thought of Ryan, gentle and silent. She could not understand why he never fought back, never showed the spirit that every Lyran carried. She wondered if perhaps the whispers were true, that humans were only fit for soft lives and quiet work. Yet in her heart, she remembered the way Ryan's hand always found hers, the way he never failed to listen when she spoke, the way he built their small home with patience and care. He had given her peace in a world that often glorified war. As the moons rose high in the sky, Myra whispered to herself, "Perhaps strength is not always in the sword." But even as she spoke the words, a shadow of doubt remained. She did not yet know that her quiet husband carried a past far greater than the fields. She did not know that the calm man beside her had once held a weapon that could change the fate of worlds. She only knew the silence of his heart, and the peace of his hands. The days passed, and life in the colony seemed unchanged. Yet beyond the hills, the Varric ships moved closer. The quiet life would not last much longer, and Myra would soon learn that the man she thought she knew was far more than he seemed. The colony rested at the edge of the valley, small and quiet under the twin moons. Life continued as if nothing would ever disturb it, but fear had begun to slip into the hearts of the people. Travelers brought darker news with every passing week. The Varric raiders had been seen near neighboring systems. Villages were burned, ships captured, and families taken away. The stories spread quickly, whispered in markets and spoken in low voices around fires. The Lyran warriors grew restless. They sharpened their swords, polished their armor, and trained until the sun sank behind the hills. Their pride and strength gave comfort to some, but even the strongest admitted that the Varric were not like common raiders. They were disciplined, cruel, and many in number. Myra walked among her people and heard their words. The Lyran spoke with loud voices of glory and of standing firm, but Myra could hear the worry hidden beneath. Even the bravest warriors looked toward the skies too often. They feared what might come out of the dark. At home, Ryan remained the same. He rose with the dawn, worked in the soil, mended fences, and carried water. His steps were steady, his face calm. He never joined the warriors in their training, never spoke of battles or raids. To him, the fields were his duty, and nothing more. Myra tried to keep her patience, but her heart grew heavy with doubt. One evening, as she returned from watching the warriors drill, she found Ryan sitting by the fire, whittling wood into the shape of a bird. She sat across from him, staring at his calm face. "Why do you never train with them?" she asked. "The Varric may come. You know they will not show mercy." Ryan looked up, his eyes quiet and steady. "Training with them will not change what is coming," he said softly. "Then you would do nothing." Myra pressed. Her voice carried more frustration than she intended. "Will you wait while others fight and die? Will you leave me to stand alone among my people?" Ryan set the small wooden bird aside. He leaned closer, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Myra, some things are better left asleep. If I take up the sword again, I will not be the man you know. I have lived in peace because I chose it. Do not ask me to awaken what I left behind." Myra stared at him, stunned by the weight of his words. She wanted to ask more, but his silence told her nothing else would come. Frustrated, she stood and left the house. His words followed her into the night like a shadow she could not shake. In the days that followed, Myra watched as the colony prepared defenses. The Lyran warriors built walls of stone and wood around the village. They set watch posts on the hills and trained day and night. Children were sent to shelters, and the elders prayed to the old stars. Rolos, the warrior who often mocked Ryan, grew louder in his scorn. He laughed in the market, pointing at Ryan as he carried water jars. "Look, the human farmer brings us water while we sharpen our swords. When the Varric come, will he offer them bread instead of battle?" Some laughed with him, though uneasily. Myra's anger burned, but before she could speak, Ryan only lowered his head and continued walking. His silence made the mockery sting worse, and Myra's heart ached with shame and confusion. One night, the village gathered in the central hall. The leaders of the Lyran spoke to the people. They confirmed what many already feared. Scouts had seen Varric ships moving closer to their sector. The colony had little time to prepare. "We will stand," the head elder declared. Our blades are strong, and our honor is great. If we fall as Liren. We will not bend to raiders. The hall erupted with shouts of pride and anger, but Myra noticed the worry in their eyes. She felt the same. Her gaze slid to Ryan, who stood at the back, silent as always. His face showed no fear, no fire, only calm patience. When they returned home, Myra could no longer keep her thoughts hidden. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling, "are you truly content to stand aside while the Varric come? Will you not even hold a blade to defend our home?" Ryan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I will defend you, Myra. That is all that matters to me." She wanted to believe him, yet his words brought her no comfort. How could one quiet man protect them against the storm that was coming? In the nights that followed, Myra often lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the stories of the Varric, of the destruction they left behind. She remembered the laughter of Rolos and the scorn of her people. She remembered Ryan's strange words, about something left asleep. The unease grew heavier with each passing day. The winds felt colder, the skies darker. Even the birds seemed quieter in the trees. Myra could feel the storm drawing closer. One morning, as the sun rose red on the horizon, a horn sounded from the hills. The watchposts had seen movement in the sky. Black ships with cruel shapes had entered their world. The shadows were no longer whispers. The Varric had come. The horn still echoed across the valley as Myra rushed outside. The villagers were already gathering in the square, their faces pale with fear. From the hills, black ships could be seen breaking through the clouds. They were sharp and heavy, shaped like claws gripping the sky. Even from a distance, Myra could feel the dread they carried. The Varric had arrived. The Liren warriors armed themselves quickly. Armor clattered, blades gleamed, and war cries rang out. The children and elders were sent into the hidden shelters under the ground. Myra helped guide some of the younger ones, but her eyes kept searching for Ryan. She found him standing near their house, looking up at the sky with the same calm expression he always wore. "Ryan," she said sharply, running to him, "we must fight. You cannot stand here while they come closer." He looked at her with steady eyes. "Go to the shelter, Myra. Stay safe." Her chest burned at his words. "I will not hide. I am Liren. I will fight with my people. But what of you? Will you remain here as if none of this touches you?" For a long moment, Ryan said nothing. Then his gaze moved past her, toward the ships that now roared lower, fire streaking across the sky as they descended. "Stay close to me," he finally said. The ground shook as the first of the Varric ships landed beyond the fields. Doors opened with heavy crashes, and lines of soldiers marched out. They were tall and armored in dark plates, their weapons glowing with cruel light. Their voices rose in a deep chant that made the air tremble. The Liren warriors charged to meet them, shouting with fierce pride. Steel rang against metal, cries of battle filled the air, and the quiet valley became a storm of fire and blood. Myra grabbed a spear from the racks by the square and joined her people. She had trained since childhood, and though fear tugged at her heart, she stood strong beside her kin. She thrust and blocked, fighting with all her strength, but the Varric were merciless. Their armor turned aside many blows, and their weapons struck with deadly force. She caught sight of Ryan among the chaos. He was unarmed, guiding frightened villagers away from the clash. Even then, he did not lift a weapon. Myra's anger burned, but before she could shout, a squad of Varric soldiers broke past the Liren line and rushed toward the homes. Myra stood in their path, spear in hand. Her heart pounded as the armor giants closed in. She fought bravely, striking one across the chest, but her weapon snapped under the weight of his armor. Another soldier raised his blade high to strike her down. Before the blow could fall, Ryan moved. He stepped between Myra and the soldier, his eyes no longer calm but sharp with something deeper. With quick motion, he pulled a long bundle from the earth near their home, hidden under the boards of a small chest. The cloth fell away, and a sword gleamed in his hands. It was no simple blade. The steel shone with a faint blue light, etched with markings that seemed older than the stars. The moment he held it, his entire presence changed. The quiet farmer was gone. In his place stood a warrior with unshakable strength. With one swift strike, Ryan cut through the soldier's armor as if it were paper. The Varric fell at his feet, lifeless. The others hesitated, shocked by the force of his attack. Ryan moved again, fast as the wind. His blade flashed, and two more fell before they could even raise their weapons. Myra stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. She had never seen him move like this, never imagined such power hidden inside the man who spent his days in the fields. The Lyran warriors also noticed. Their battle cries faltered as they caught sight of the human with the glowing sword. Some whispered his name, others stared in silence. Even Roloz, who once mocked him, looked on with wide eyes. Ryan did not pause. He pressed forward, cutting down the Varric soldiers one by one. His steps were precise, his strikes clean, his eyes burning with focus. The sword seemed alive in his hands, humming with energy as it cleaved through armor and weapon alike. Myra found her voice at last. "Ryan, what are you?" she whispered. But he did not answer. He only fought, and with every strike, the tide of battle shifted. The Lyran, inspired by his strength, surged forward with renewed fury. Together they pushed the Varric back, holding the line against the invaders. When the first wave of soldiers lay broken, the valley fell silent. Smoke rose from the fields, cries of the wounded filled the air, but the village still stood. Myra walked slowly toward her husband. His sword was still in his hand, glowing faintly under the red light of the setting sun. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, Myra saw not the calm farmer she had married but a warrior who carried the weight of countless battles. "You kept this from me," she said softly. Ryan lowered the sword but did not let it go. His voice was quiet, yet heavy with meaning. "Because once it is drawn, peace is gone." Myra's heart pounded as she looked at him. She did not know what secrets lived in his past, but she knew the truth now. Her husband was no simple human farmer. He was something far more dangerous, and far more powerful. And the Varric were not finished. The smoke from the battle still hung over the valley when the villagers gathered in silence. Bodies of the fallen Varric lay scattered on the fields, their black armor broken and twisted. The Lyran warriors carried their wounded back to safety, but their eyes kept turning toward Ryan. He stood at the center of the square with the strange glowing sword in his hand. The blade gave off a faint blue light, even in the fading sun. The quiet farmer who once bent over crops now looked like a figure from an old story. His stance was strong, his eyes sharp, and the weight of his presence filled the air. Myra walked to him slowly, her heart racing. She had seen him fight, seen the way he cut through the enemy like no one she had ever known. She could still hear the sound of his blade striking armor, still see the speed and strength that no simple man should have. The other Lyran gathered around, whispering to one another. Some looked fearful, others amazed. Roloz, the warrior who mocked Ryan for years, stared at him with wide eyes. At last he spoke, his voice uneasy. "No farmer moves like that. No man from Earth should wield a blade with such power. Who are you, human?" Ryan lifted his gaze but gave no answer. He sheathed the sword across his back, the light of the blade dimming as it slid into its scabbard. His silence only deepened the mystery, but no one pressed him further. They all felt the weight of what they had seen. Myra could not remain silent. As the warriors dispersed to tend to their wounded, she stepped close to Ryan. "You must tell me the truth," she said firmly. "You are not who I thought you were. I deserve to know." Ryan looked at her with tired eyes. "I wanted to leave that life behind," he said at last. The sword was meant to stay hidden. But the Varric forced my hand. Myra's voice trembled as she asked, "What life? What have you been hiding from me all these years?" He lowered his head. "I was once part of an order of human warriors. We were trained to guard not only Earth but the worlds beyond it. We were keepers of an ancient flame, defenders against those who would break the peace. I carried this sword in many battles before I came here." Myra's breath caught. She had heard old stories of such warriors, though most believed them to be myths. "And you chose to leave?" she asked. "Yes," he answered quietly. "After years of fighting, I wanted peace. I wanted a life with no more death, no more fire. When I came to this colony, I thought I could bury the sword forever." Myra looked at him, torn between anger and awe. Part of her wanted to shout at him for hiding such a truth, for letting her believe he was only a farmer. Yet another part of her felt pride that her husband carried such power. "You lied to me," she said softly. "I never lied," Ryan replied. "I only kept silent. I wanted you to know me as a man, not as a weapon." Before Myra could answer, a shout rose from the watchpost on the hill. Another Varric ship was moving in the distance, circling the valley like a predator. The warriors quickly readied themselves once more. The fight was not over. Ryan looked to Myra. "Stay near me. The first wave was only a test. They will return in greater force." That night, the village prepared for the next attack. Fires burned in the square as the wounded were tended and the walls strengthened. The Lyran warriors sharpened their blades and stood watch through the dark hours. Yet their eyes always returned to Ryan. Some approached him with respect now. "Human," one said, "you fight with honor. Will you lead us when the next battle comes?" Ryan shook his head. "I am no leader. Fight as you always have. I will stand with you when the time comes." But Myra saw the truth in their eyes. They had already begun to look to him as more than a farmer. His strength had turned their fear into hope. As the night deepened, Myra sat with Ryan near the fire. She studied the sword at his side. "This blade," she asked, "what is it?" "No ordinary weapon glows as yours does." Ryan touched the hilt gently. "It was forged long ago, by hands that wished to keep humanity safe. It carries energy from the old star cores. Few can wield it. Fewer still can master it. It is not a gift, Myra. It is a burden." She reached for his hand. "Yet you bear it with strength." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw sorrow in his eyes. Strength always demands a price. Before she could speak, another horn sounded from the hills. More ships were coming. The Varric had not given up, and this time their numbers would be greater. The warriors rushed to the walls, their armor shining in the moonlight. Myra rose, spear in hand, ready to stand with her people. She turned to Ryan. He drew his sword once more, its blue light glowing brighter against the dark. The quiet man she once thought she married was gone. In his place stood a warrior who carried the weight of many battles. And the war for their colony was only beginning. The morning after the battle was heavy with smoke and silence. The villagers buried their dead in the fields beyond the river, while the wounded were tended with care. The air smelled of ash, yet the colony still stood. For many, that was a miracle. For others, it was a mystery, because the miracle had come from the hands of one quiet human. Ryan walked among them, carrying wood to repair broken homes and helping move the injured. He did not seek praise, yet every eye followed him. The memory of his sword striking down the Varric burned in their minds. The whispers began again, not of weakness this time, but of questions. Who was this man they had called farmer? How could a human fight like a warrior born of fire? Myra stayed close to him. Her heart felt torn between pride and confusion. She loved him, yet she realized now that she had never truly known him. He had carried a past greater than anything she had imagined, and he had chosen to keep it hidden. When the sun was high, the elders called a council. Warriors, farmers, and hunters gathered in the central hall. Myra sat among them, while Ryan stood at the edge of the room, silent as always. The head elder, an old Lyran with deep scars, raised his voice. "The Varric have struck, and they will return," he said. "Our blades are strong, but they are many. We cannot face them with pride alone. We must know what hope remains." His gaze turned toward Ryan. The hall grew quiet. Even Roloz, who once mocked the human, lowered his head and said nothing. At last, the elder spoke again. "Human, you carry a sword we have never seen. You fight as no farmer should. Tell us the truth. Who are you?" All eyes turned to Ryan. For a moment, he seemed as if he would remain silent. But then he stepped forward, his voice steady. "I was once part of the Sentinels of Earth," he said. "We were an order of warriors sworn to protect not just our home but all who stood with us. We fought where no one else would stand. I carried this sword in battles across the stars. But I grew tired of endless war. I left my order, seeking peace, and I thought I found it here." The hall murmured in surprise. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others looked uneasy. Ryan continued. "I do not wish to lead, but I will not see this colony fall. If you wish, I will teach you what I know. Not just how to fight with strength, but how to fight with unity." The elder nodded slowly. "Then let it be so. You will teach us. For without you, we may not survive what is coming." From that day, the colony changed. The fields became training grounds, and the quiet valley rang with the clash of practice blades. The Lyran warriors, proud and skilled, learned to move with new discipline under Ryan's command. He showed them how to fight as one unit, not only as individuals seeking honor. Even the farmers and hunters joined. Ryan taught them how to hold spears, how to defend the walls, how to strike together. He moved among them with patience, correcting their stances, guiding their steps. He never shouted, never boasted, but his calm voice carried more weight than any battle cry. Myra trained as well. Ryan showed her how to fight with greater precision, how to use speed and timing over brute strength. She had always thought herself a capable warrior, but under his teaching, she discovered a sharper edge within herself. At night, when the fires burned low, Myra sat with him. She asked him about his past, about the Sentinels and the battles he had seen. Sometimes he told her small pieces, of worlds that burned and enemies far worse than the Varric. Other times, he grew silent, as if the memories weighed too much to speak. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked one night. Ryan looked into the flames. "Because I wanted you to love me as I am, not as the warrior I was. I wanted you to see the man, not the sword." Myra touched his hand. "I see both now. And I do not fear it." The days turned to weeks, and the colony grew stronger. Where once the people looked only to their warriors, now they looked to Ryan. Even Roloz began to follow his guidance, training without scorn. The old pride of the Lyran blended with the calm strength of the human, and together they forged something new. But the threat never left their skies. Scouts reported more Varric ships gathering beyond the system. Each day the shadow grew larger. The people knew the storm would soon return, fiercer than before. On the eve of the new moon, the colony gathered once more in the square. Ryan stood before them, his sword strapped across his back. He spoke few words, but they carried deep into every heart. "The Varric believe fear will break us," he said. "They believe strength belongs only to them. But we will show them that unity is greater than fear. We will show them that humanity, Lyran, and every voice here stands as one." The people answered with a roar that shook the night. For the first time, Myra saw no doubt in their eyes. They believed. And when she looked at Ryan, she felt the same. He was not only her husband. he was the flame that would lead them through the darkness. The valley was no longer the same quiet place it had once been. The fields that once grew crops were now training grounds, and the voices of the people no longer carried only songs of peace but chants of preparation. Wooden shields lined the walls, spears stood ready, and the watchposts on the hills never rested. Everyone knew the Varric would return. For days the skies remained silent, yet the silence felt heavy. Scouts who traveled beyond the hills spoke of movement among the stars. Dark shapes had been seen near the edge of the system. Ships larger than before, moving together. The enemy was gathering, and soon they would strike with full strength. Ryan trained the people with tireless patience. He moved through the ranks, correcting stances, guiding hands, and teaching unity. The Lyran warriors were strong, but under his direction they learned to fight not only with pride but with precision. The farmers and hunters, who once knew nothing of war, now stood tall with spears in hand. Even the youngest who could fight carried bows and arrows, their faces set with resolve. Myra fought beside them each day. She sparred under Ryan's watchful eye, her movements sharper than before. She learned not only how to strike but how to read the flow of battle, how to move as part of a unit. She had always thought strength was in standing tall alone, but now she understood the deeper truth of fighting as one. At night, as the stars burned cold above them, Ryan would sit by the fire with her. His sword lay across his knees, glowing faintly in the dark. Sometimes she would see his eyes far away, as if he looked not at the fire but at battles from long ago. She wanted to ask about those memories, but she knew they carried more sorrow than words could hold. Instead, she placed her hand on his, reminding him that here, he was not alone. On the seventh day of waiting, the horn sounded again. The watchposts had seen them. Dozens of Varric ships, black as shadow, entered the sky. They came in formation, their engines burning red like fire in the heavens. The ground trembled as they drew closer. The colony gathered at the walls. Warriors gripped their blades, children and elders stayed hidden in the shelters, and Myra stood with her spear at the front. Ryan walked along the line, his sword strapped across his back. His presence calmed the fear in every heart. He stopped before the people and spoke with steady voice. Remember what we have trained for. Do not fight alone. Do not let fear guide you. Together, we are stronger than they can understand. Hold the line, and the valley will stand. The people roared in answer, their voices echoing across the hills. The first of the ships landed with thunder, and the ground shook as doors opened. The Varric poured out, more numerous than before. Their armor gleamed under the pale light, their weapons glowing with cruel fire. They marched in rows, their chants deep and cold, a sound meant to crush hope. But the colony did not bend. Under Ryan's command, the defenders moved as one. Arrows flew in waves, spears struck in unison, and shields locked together. The first clash shook the walls, but the line held. Ryan drew his sword, and its blue light blazed against the dark. He moved through the battlefield with speed and strength that no eye could follow. Every strike cut through armor, every motion sent the enemy falling. The Lyran warriors followed his lead, their pride now mixed with discipline, their unity sharper than steel. Myra fought close to him, her heart burning with both fear and courage. She saw how the enemy pressed harder, how their numbers threatened to overwhelm, yet she also saw how her people stood together. They no longer fought as scattered voices but as one song of resistance. The battle raged for hours. The fields turned to fire and smoke, cries of pain and fury filled the air. The Varric pressed from all sides, but the colony would not break. Where the line faltered, Ryan appeared, his sword cutting through the enemy like a storm. His calm voice guided them, his presence turning fear into strength. At one moment, Myra was struck to the ground, her spear knocked from her hand. A Varric soldier loomed over her, blade raised high. Before the strike could fall, Ryan was there. His sword flashed, and the enemy collapsed. He reached down, pulling Myra to her feet. His eyes met hers, steady and fierce. "Stand, Myra. This is not the end." She gripped her weapon again, her heart steadier than before. Together they pressed forward, side by side. As the sun sank, the battle grew even darker. More ships landed, pouring soldiers into the valley. The defenders were weary, their arms heavy, their breath short. Yet they fought on, refusing to yield. When the last horn of the night sounded, the enemy pulled back, regrouping near their ships. The valley lay in ruin, fires burning in the fields, but the colony still stood. The people cheered, raising their blades in triumph, but Ryan's eyes remained on the horizon. He knew the Varric had not been defeated. This was only the second wave. The greatest storm was still to come. Myra saw his face in the firelight. "You fear they will return stronger," she said. Ryan nodded. "Yes. But so will we." The valley lay scarred from the battle. Smoke rose from the fields, and the air smelled of ash and iron. The people stood wounded but alive, their hearts burning with both pride and fear. They had survived the second wave, but all knew the storm was not over. The Varric would return. At dawn, the sky darkened again. Dozens of ships blocked the light, covering the valley in shadow. This time the enemy came with full strength. Their fleet stretched across the heavens like a wall of iron. The sound of their engines roared like thunder, and the earth shook as they began to descend. Myra stood at the walls, her spear in hand. She looked at the people around her and saw no fear in their eyes. They had fought, they had endured, and now they would face the end together. Ryan walked to the front, his sword glowing faintly across his back. He raised his voice, calm and steady. "Today is not the day we fall. They think we are weak, but they will learn what it means to fight humans and Lyrians standing as one. Hold your courage. No matter how great their numbers, we will not break." The roar of the people shook the valley, and for a moment their voices rose higher than the engines in the sky. The first blast came from above. Fire rained down from the ships, striking the ground and tearing the earth apart. The walls shook, and many stumbled, but the defenders stood tall. The Varric soldiers poured from their ships in endless lines, their armor shining like black steel. The battle began. Arrows filled the air, spears struck the ground, and blades clashed against armor. The valley turned into a storm of steel and fire. The Varric pressed forward with crushing force, their weapons burning with strange light, but the defenders met them with courage born from love for their home. Ryan was at the center of the storm. His sword burned brighter than ever before, its light cutting through the darkness. He moved with speed beyond sight, striking down enemy after enemy, his voice guiding his people to hold their ground. Where the line broke, he was there. Where fear grew, he turned it into strength. Myra fought at his side, her heart steady and her hands sure. She struck with skill she had never dreamed she could hold. She felt the bond of her people, every fighter moving not for themselves but for the one beside them. Hours passed, and the sun disappeared behind smoke. Still the battle raged. The valley shook with every strike, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Yet the defenders did not fall. But the Varric were endless. Wave after wave crashed upon the valley, and for each enemy struck down, two more stepped forward. Ryan knew that the time had come for something greater. He climbed the hill above the valley, raising his sword high. The blade shone like a star, casting light across the battlefield. For a moment even the enemy stopped, staring at the strange glow. "This is our home," Ryan's voice thundered, reaching every ear. "And you will not take it from us." With those words, he leapt into the heart of the enemy army. His sword cut in arcs of light, every strike stronger than before. The ground shook with his steps, and the Varric lines shattered under his fury. Myra watched with both fear and pride. She saw not just a quiet man but a warrior whose spirit burned brighter than fire. He was not only fighting for survival but for every soul who stood with him, for every child hidden in the shelters, for every dream of peace yet to come. The defenders, filled with new courage, surged forward. Together they pushed the enemy back, step by step. The valley rang with the sound of unity, and the Vayruk began to falter. At last, Ryan reached the great warlord of the Vayruk, a towering figure clad in black armor. The warlord roared and raised his massive blade, striking with force that split the earth. But Ryan met the blow with calm strength. Their swords clashed, light against shadow, and the battlefield held its breath. The fight was long and fierce. Sparks lit the air as steel met steel. The warlord pressed with raw power, but Ryan's skill was sharper. With one final strike, his glowing sword cut through the dark armor, and the warlord fell. The enemy army froze. Their leader was gone, their strength broken. One by one, the Vayruk ships began to lift, retreating into the sky. The valley, battered and burning, still stood. The people raised their voices in triumph, their cheers echoing through the smoke-filled air. Myra dropped her weapon, her body weak with exhaustion, but her heart was light. She looked at Ryan standing tall with his sword, his chest rising with heavy breath. To her, he was no longer just the quiet human she had once thought she knew. He was the flame that had saved them all. Ryan lowered his sword, the glow fading slowly. He turned to Myra, his eyes soft now, no longer a warrior but once again her husband. She walked to him, placing her hand on his arm. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Ryan gave a small smile. "No, Myra. We all kept it together. The valley would heal, the people would rebuild, and the memory of this day would live in their songs." They had faced the storm, and they had not broken. The Vayruk had learned that humans, though quiet and humble, carried a strength that could not be crushed. And Myra knew she had married not just a man but a legend, one whose story would be told long after the smoke faded.